Clint Eastwood secretly walks into his own restaurant, then freezes at what he hears. Clint Eastwood quietly entered his own restaurant, unnoticed by diners, until he heard a waitress crying. What happened next left the entire room speechless. It was a quiet evening in Carmel by the Sea, a place where everyone knew each other and unfamiliar faces rarely went unrecognized. Under the warm glow of streetlights, Mission Ranch stood in its timeless charm, a restaurant with history, character, and Clint Eastwood's name above the door. But tonight, there were no paparazzi, no whispers of Hollywood royalty. No one expected him to be here. At 94 years old, Eastwood still carried an undeniable presence, one that could shift the air in a room without a single word. His visit was unplanned, just an old habit of checking in, observing the place when no one knew he was watching. The scent of sizzling steak, the soft murmur of conversation, the distant hum of a piano, it all felt familiar. Blending into the background in a well-worn jacket and dark slacks, he was just another old-timer looking for a quiet seat. But then, he heard it. A muffled sob. Not the usual sounds of a bustling restaurant, but something out of place. His gaze sharpened as he followed the sound to a young waitress standing near the service station, her back turned, shoulders trembling. She gripped the counter, trying to compose herself, wiping her face before forcing on a mask of professionalism. Something about it didn't sit right. Eastwood had seen his share of struggles, people handling their pain in silence. This wasn't just frustration. This was hurt. He stayed still, listening. Nearby, two employees spoke in hushed voices. "That guy's been on her case all night," a young man muttered. "She's new, just started last month," the other waitress whispered. "It's disgusting, and no one's saying a thing." "Nobody's saying a thing." Clint's jaw tightened. He scanned the room, his sharp eyes locking onto the man responsible. At a corner table, a middle-aged man leaned back in his chair, laughing too loudly, acting like he owned the place. His loosened tie, exaggerated gestures, and the uneasy expressions of his companions told Clint everything he needed to know. This wasn't just a bad tipper. This was the kind of man who thrived on making others feel small. The waitress emerged from the kitchen, her posture stiff, masking the weight of what had happened. She approached the man's table, careful, as if walking on broken glass. The man smirked. "Ah, look who's back," he drawled. The people at his table shifted uncomfortably, pretending not to notice. "Forget how to do your job, sweetheart," he sneered. She quietly placed a fresh glass of water in front of him. "There you go, sir," she said, voice steady. "Oh, so now you're polite," he chuckled, turning to his friends. "See? Push them enough, and they figure it out." Her fingers gripped the tray tighter. Not a single person at the table told him to stop. And that's what got under Clint's skin. Then the man decided to push further. "You know what? I think you got my order wrong," he said, inspecting his plate. The waitress blinked. "You asked for ribeye, medium." "No, no, no." He shook his head dramatically. "I said medium rare. See? You just don't listen, do you?" Clint saw it. The flicker of exhaustion, frustration, humiliation. She knew exactly what was happening. She wasn't confused. She was cornered. "Would you like me to have the kitchen fix it?" she asked, voice controlled. "Oh, so now I have to wait another half hour? Maybe if you weren't so busy running your mouth, you'd actually do your job." That's when she cracked. Not visibly, not dramatically, but Clint saw it. A hesitation, a jaw tightening, a need to escape. Clint had seen enough. The waitress stepped away, preparing for another round of humiliation. But this time she wasn't alone. Clint rose from his chair, moving deliberately. No one had noticed him yet. He intended to keep it that way, for now. His steps were silent, but carried weight. The waitress returned to the table. The man smirked, swirling his drink. "Took you long enough. What, you go cry in the back?" The slight tremor in her hands as she set the plate down was all Clint needed to see. Then, the man reached. Not aggressively, not violently, but just enough. His hand hovered near her wrist, subtle, a move that could be excused as accidental. She flinched, and that was it. Clint's voice cut through the air like a blade. "That's enough." The restaurant froze. The man turned, blinking at the old man standing before him. "And who the hell are you?" he scoffed. "Got yourself a hero complex, pal?" Clint didn't blink, didn't move, didn't have to. "No," he said, voice steady. "Just a man who doesn't like bullies." The laughter at the table died. The waitress took a step back. The man scoffed. "You serious? Over a waitress?" Clint tilted his head. "I watched you all night," he said. "Saw you humiliate someone just trying to do their job. And now you're sitting there thinking you're untouchable." Silence. The man's bravado slipped. His friends weren't laughing anymore. Then Clint took another step forward. "Careful." The word landed like a hammer. For the first time that night, the man looked uncertain. His gaze darted around, searching for support. None came. His dinner guests shifted uncomfortably. "Let's just eat," one muttered. And that was it. The shift. The realization. The man forced out a chuckle. "Whatever. Not worth the damn trouble." Clint wasn't done. "Apologize." The man nearly choked on his drink. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Clint said. "You spent the night tearing her down. Now you're going to look her in the eye and apologize." The room held its breath. Finally, after a long pause, defeat. "I'm sorry," the man muttered. "Not good enough." This time he lifted his gaze. For the first time, he meant it. The restaurant seemed to exhale. Conversations resumed in hushed murmurs. The waitress hesitated, then met Clint's gaze. "Thank you," she said softly. Clint nodded. He didn't need thanks. This wasn't about him. As he stepped outside, he hadn't come looking for trouble. He never did. But sometimes, trouble finds the wrong person. And when that happened, Clint Eastwood made damn sure it didn't go unanswered.